Today we're going to talk about the terms and the types and shadows that God uses for the bride and for the church. And we need to learn what they are because so many people think that the church is not here for that first half of Daniel's 70th week because the term church is not used anywhere after the 7 letters to the churches. And actually, God is using other terms for the church in the book of Revelation. And so this is why it's so important for us to learn how to identify how he's referring to the church. So I'm going to start by talking about, just for a moment here, that there are many names for the Son of God throughout the scriptures. For example, the branch. Okay, now that's a weird thing because that's a tree. It's not a person. So if God is going to use a term for Jesus as the branch, then that means it does not have to be a people group. He's going to use an example other than a people group. Okay, the good shepherd. Okay, now he's using an example of a person, a shepherd, an occupation. So if this is how God is referring to Jesus in the scriptures as the good shepherd, well, then think about how he's going to refer to the church or the bride and what they will be doing. Another term that God uses for Jesus in the scriptures, in the New Testament, you're familiar, the door. Okay, the door is an inanimate object. It's useful. It's what you would open or close to prevent people from going in or going out. So isn't that interesting that God refers to himself as the door? Well, that means he might use a term similar for the church or for the bride. Okay, God uses the term the light. Jesus is the light. We've got to look for something similar for the church or for the bride. And Jesus says that we are the light. He is the light. We are the light. Well, if he's the door, then we are the door. If he's a good shepherd, then we can be a good shepherd. If he's a branch, we can be a branch. Okay, God refers to himself as the Word. Jesus is the Word. The Word is Jesus. Well, we share the Word, so we are taking on that type and shadow. Jesus is called the Anointed One in the Old Testament and the New Testament. You guys, we are anointed. Jesus calls himself the head. Now, he calls the church his body, but he also says that we will be the head and not the tail. Interesting, another term that God uses for himself, the Messiah would be as a worm. So here we're seeing that a type and shadow for Jesus can be something that we might reel at, that we don't like. Okay, so those are just a few of the terms, types, and shadows that God uses for himself. So now I want to take a look at some terms, types, and shadows that God uses for the bride. And here on the screen, you see that in the Old Testament, I put that in blue, and in the New Testament, I put that in black. And we want to take a look at Adam's rib. Genesis 2:22, that is the bride. Well, Jesus is the second Adam, so his bride is his rib. Enoch is a type of the bride. You can look at that in Genesis 5:24, Hebrews 11:5. And I'm going to kind of go through these quickly because I don't want to take a lot of time today. Rebecca is a type and shadow of the bride. You can read Genesis 24. Joseph's Gentile bride in Genesis 41:45 is a type and shadow of us, the bride. The ornate robe that Joseph's father gave him, that Jacob gave Joseph, that's in Genesis 37:3. When you read that in context and the experiences that Joseph had with the robe, you'll see how that can teach us things about the bride. Okay, now let's move to the New Testament. the names, types, and shadows of the bride. You'll want to read about the woman at the well. That's in John chapter 4. You'll want to read that the bride has made herself ready. Revelation 19:7. Now, there's many in the church, and the bride is in the church. She's the hidden part of the church, but many in the church are not making themselves ready as a bride. Okay, the rainbow around the throne. That is in Revelation 4:3. That is a type and shadow of the bride. And connect that with the ornate robe that Jacob made his son Joseph and presented to him. It's all those colors, probably. You can read in the Old Covenant about the jewels. The bride, her ornaments were jewels. What happens when light shines through jewels, through these precious stones? Well, it forms what would look like a rainbow around the throne. Okay, Mary, who sat at the feet of Jesus in Luke 10, verse 39, she is a type of the bride. So read that passage. You'll learn things about the bride. Unfazed by the busyness that was going on around her. Martha was trying to distract her. Mary was not distracted by that. Okay, the towel that Jesus used to wash the disciples' feet in John chapter 13. So think about this. After the bride is raptured, because she goes up pre-trib, Jesus is going to gird himself with the bride, and she's going to take part in washing the feet of the left behind church. So she's kind of in a hidden position. Do you see that? The white stone that will bring hidden manna or hidden word to the church in Revelation 2:17. Also, another type and shadow of the bride, and a lot of people don't make this connection. We've made a video on it. The Revelation 12 sign will happen again. It will be the bride in position in a constellation pattern so that the church can look up and see that their redemption is nigh. And even Paul talks about how different stars have different brightnesses, but we are going to be stars because Luke chapter 20, verse 36 says that those who are redeemed, they are like stars. Well, stars are angels. Okay, now let's quickly take a look at the church, and we're going to look at some names, types, and shadows and objects that teach us about the church. Aaron's staff that swallowed up the magicians' staffs. You can find that in Exodus chapter 7, verse 12. So when you read that passage, you can learn about the church. What's going to happen when God begins to use them, when they are raptured and in their glorified body. Okay, the second army in Joel chapter 2, verses 7 through 11, that's the glorified church operating in divine order, rescuing the remnant. Okay, let's move to the New Testament types and shadows for the church. Oh, the children of the bride chamber. Matthew 9:15, Mark 2:19, Luke 5:34. The children of the bride chamber. They're not the bride, they're not the groom. If you're reading a New American Standard Bible, they are called the attendants of the bridegroom. Well, that is also true because at Christ's coronation ceremony, which is on the same day as his wedding, well, they will be the attendants to the groom. Okay, so it's very important to understand that the children of the bride chamber, they're not the bride, they're not the groom, they are the children. John chapter 3, verse 29 calls them the friend of the bridegroom. The church is referred to as a city set on a hill that cannot be hidden. So the light of the church cannot be hidden. That's in Matthew 5, verse 14. Now the bride is hidden. She's the rib. So she's not a part of the body that's visible, like you can see my hands You can see my feet, you can see my ears, my nose, but the rib you can't see. She's hidden right now in the church. And when she's raptured, even that rapture at pre-trib, it's a hidden rapture. The only ones that might see the bride go up at pre-trib are the left behind church. But the world at large is not going to see her. It's going to happen so quickly. Now, when the church is raptured at mid-trib, oh, that will be seen. That is not a hidden rapture. So you see, when we read the details about all the rapture passages, we need to separate the passages based on the details, because it's those details that are going to help you know those are different events. And when you start reading the details, you can find out, well, is this the pre-trib rapture of the bride, or is this the mid-trib rapture of the church? And so we need to be learning from the mistakes that Israel is making as they interpret the Bible prophecies. They're taking all the prophecies that have to do with the coming of the Messiah, lumping them into one event instead of separating them out and recognizing there's two advents of their Messiah. And see, the church is making the same Bible prophecy interpretation mistakes as the nation of Israel. And that may not work out optimally for the church. So if people don't start recognizing there's more than one event, more than one rapture, and all they do is preach one rapture and they start giving the types and shadows, which most of them are mid-trib, well, what they're doing is they're giving themselves that mid-trib rapture when God the Father is offering them a pre-trib rapture of the bride. I want all of my listeners to understand there's more than one event, and there's only a couple other channels that are recognizing this and doing a fabulous job of teaching this, and that would be Prophecy with Kristen and Wayne Fowler with the channel We Are the Overcomers. Both of those channels are doing a great job of separating out the scriptures and connecting them with the proper rapture event, whether it's the first fruits harvest, the main harvest, or the gleanings. Okay, so that's really important. Those are three different harvests, three different events. Another term and name and person that represents the church is Martha. She is too busy and she's distracted. And she's not only distracted herself, but she is distracting the church instead of being like Mary and being intimate with Christ, sitting at his feet. You will always have work to do. But if you spend all your time involved in your ministries instead of being intimate with Christ, it may not work out optimally for you. Okay? I'm trying to help you here. We want to gain discernment. So that was Luke chapter 10, verses 40 and 41. Okay, the 5 wise virgins in Matthew 25:1. That's the church. They are not the bride. They are the bridesmaids, so to speak. They are going to be friends of the bride, friends of the groom, witnesses of the ceremony. The wedding ceremony is on Christ's coronation day, and that is after the mid-trib rapture, because we need to get the children of the bride chamber up to heaven in their glorified bodies, because the coronation of Christ and his wedding is going to take place in heaven, and you need a glorified body to be in heaven. The 5 foolish virgins, they're left behind. They missed the mid-trib rapture. All right, moving on. The great multitude, which no one could count. That's Revelation 7:9. That is the raptured church. Isn't it interesting? It says that no one can count them. Well, that's an important detail, because the raptured church is God's military, his army. And it was a law for kings. You are not to count your armies, because it's God who fights your battles. So this is how we know the church, they are God's glorified army, his military. They will all be coming back on white horses during the second half, when God begins to pour out his wrath. And the day of the Lord is the day that lasts a year. We've made videos on this. We've talked about this. The day of the Lord begins on the 6th year of the tribulation, on the Day of Atonement, and it goes for an entire year to the 7th year of the Day of Atonement, because it's called the day that lasts a year. And God is pouring out his wrath at that time, and he's going to use the church as the rod of iron. Okay, the church is the man-child caught up. Revelation 12:5. The church is the rod of iron. Revelation 2:27. That was promised in the letters to the left behind churches, that those who overcome would be a rod of iron. Well, Revelation 12:5, there they are receiving their promise. They are raptured up. And what is their first job? They throw the red dragon and the remaining 2/3 of his angels out of the heavenly places. They will replace the wicked entities referred to in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. Those wicked rulers, powers in the heavenly places, those principalities. Well, the raptured and resurrected church is going to yank them out of those thrones, throw them down to earth, and take their seat in those thrones and begin to rule and reign with Christ as the rod of iron. Okay, the church, they are the lampstands. Revelation 1:20, and the two witnesses are lampstands, so that would be Revelation 11:4. Okay, I want to talk just briefly what the terms are for the remnant. Well, Elisha is the remnant. The book of Ruth, that's the remnant. Read the book of Lamentations. They are the ones lamenting in that book. It's very painful to read that Old Testament book, because that's what the nation of Israel will be going through during that second half of Daniel's 70th week. That is the period called the time of Jacob's trouble. The reason why they missed the mid-trib rapture is because they were Jews in Israel persecuting their Jewish brethren who'd come to believe in Jesus Christ as their Messiah. So they're not in trouble yet. The ones doing the persecuting, they've got secured positions. They're living the life in the beast system. Well, then the beast turns on them at mid-trib. They miss that mid-trib rapture, and now is the time of Jacob's trouble for that second half. Okay, the 5 foolish virgins, they are the remnant. The wheat snatched to the barn, they are the remnant. And now what our team here is discovering is there are several groups within the remnant. There's going to be a portion of the remnant that's in the second half of Daniel's 70th week, that they are snatched and taken to the barn. Well, there's some that are going to be David's mighty men, and they are leading a very resourceful and scrappy campaign against the beast system. There's going to be the remnant that are hiding out in caves, probably the Qumran area or Petra. There's going to be some of the remnant that are sold as slaves to other nations around the world. So you see, there's various groups of the remnant in the second half of the tribulation. So that's something we all need to start separating out. What's happening to those various groups? What scriptures, what prophecies refer to them? All right, so this is all I'm going to do today, and I just wanted to make this really short, and I just want to thank you for listening to their videos. I appreciate you guys so much, and I'm so grateful for our team that put so much work into studying. You know, they all are rather shy, don't want to make YouTube, so I understand that. So this is why I come on here and make YouTube videos. So I'm not all that good of a presenter, but I'm hoping that you can overlook that and go back in and study the content. Follow along when we're doing a video, and I appreciate you guys so much for sharing our videos and you're subscribing. Thank you, and for clicking like. I will talk to you later. Bye.